Hello and welcome back to another update. In this one I'll be covering the Luhansk and Donetsk fronts. Starting out in the Luhansk front, the Ukrainians are continuing their attacks against Devorishne and Meshutivka as they attempt to retake these positions after the Russian counterattack a few days ago. However, the Russians have responded by digging into the ground and trying to hold their line rather than retreating as they usually do. Further south in the area of Selmahivka and Miesorehivka and Andrivka, the Russians are attempting to push back the Ukrainian forces to the Serebets River and regain control over the river to hold it as a defensive position. Further south, they are also attacking Makivka, which is the northernmost village of the southern front, where they also have this line to the Serebets River. So the Russians are trying to regain control over the river, starting from the north and going all the way south, and that is to have a better defensive position to work with, as they are also continuing their attacks in the area of Chernopopivka to push back the Ukrainian advance a couple days ago. Further south in the area of Bilohorivka, they are also continuing their attacks as well as restarting their attacks around Spirne. And as I mentioned in my tactics video, the Russians have actually started their offensive in the north towards the village of Rostolivka. And their fighting is most likely also going in the direction of Vesele. However, they have not went to the area. They are currently clearing out the no man's land to gain a better position before they advance. They are, however, continuing their fighting in Bakhmut as well as Soledar. In the southern area around Bakhmut, the Wagner PMC is continuing their attacks in the direction of Pithorodne, as well as to the east of Bakhmut and Opitne. And at the same time, they are also continuing their attacks in the direction of Klishchivka. However, a very interesting update is that the southern axis of attack isn't in the direction of Klishchivka, but actually going around it, following the edge of the canal that goes from the Severodonetsk River towards the city of Donetsk. And that is because the Russian forces are attempting to go around Klishchivka rather than entering it and fighting through it. The claim is that it will be too difficult to go through the village, so they're trying to go around it and cut it off from supplies and lay siege to it rather than advancing through it. So they are forcing their way through the south area and going around it, while at the same time they're attacking from the north, so it's a two-pronged pincer attack by the Russian forces. Further south, they're also continuing their attacks across the canal by going in the direction of Dilivka and Bilohora, as well as further south where they are attacking in the direction of Pivenichne. And this is actually very interesting because they stopped their attacks in the direction of Shumi and Pivdene and are now fighting through the highway. And I'm not exactly sure what their goal here is, other than possibly creating a buffer zone for the highway so that they can use it in the direction of Bakhmut from Horylivka and to secure their supply lines, rather than leaving the Ukrainians to have fire control over the highway. Further south in the Donetsk front, the Russian forces are continuing their attacks in the direction of Vodian, Pervomayske and Nevelske. In the direction of Vodian, they are attacking from the axis of Opitne, where they are attacking from the east towards the west, and that is to avoid crossing the river here in the south. In the area of Pervomayske, the block-to-block fighting is ongoing, and as for the case for Nevelske, they are continuing their advance through no man's land towards the village. Finally, in the area of Marinka, the block-to-block fighting is ongoing, and in Novomykhailivka, they are still attempting to enter the village. An important thing to note is that the whole operation of pulling out of Kherson, as well as them now building defensive positions in the area of Zaporizhia, as we can see here, they are building concrete bunkers, building trenches, as well as these triangular anti-tank defensive lines. These are all to create a defensive line throughout the Zaporizhia front. They are also doing this in the Bakhmut area and the Luhansk area, where they are trying to reach the river line and get control over the river line, and that is throughout the whole Luhansk front, which indicates that they're trying to get favorable defensive positions throughout the whole front line, by the river line, down to the Severodonetsk River, throughout the whole front line, building defensive positions, pushing the Ukrainians away from Donetsk city. All of these actions are all to create a very fortified defensive line for future offensive operations. Throughout this war, the reason they can't execute large-scale operations is if they concentrate a lot of forces for an offensive operation that would leave other parts of the front line in a weak position where the Ukrainians can counterattack and the whole operation will be for naught. However, now where they are creating defensive positions, they have mobilized some forces. That means they can now engage in offensive operations without having to worry about the rest of the front line, as now they are in a situation where the other front lines are well fortified and are in geographically proper positions for defensive operations. So the whole thing General Surovikin has been doing since he came in charge is to create a good defensive line that the Russian forces can use as he prepares for an offensive operation. Through the destruction of the energy grid of Ukraine as well, they're attempting to create they're trying to create as favorable as possible a situation scenario for the Russian forces so that once they engage in their offensive operation, they're prepared to pour everything in it and not having to worry about the rest of the front line. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.